Hello and welcome back to London. Now, the US elections are too close to call, and that could be bad news when it comes to sorting out the country's major budgetary problems. If neither the Republicans nor Democrats compromise on their position, then mandatory cuts to US government spending will come into force on the 2nd of January, worth $100 billion. Now, the worry is in the long term that these cutbacks will force the US economy back into recession. I've been speaking to Chris Beauchamp from IG Markets about the headwinds facing the US economy. So it seems the US election is going to be incredibly close, not just the presidential election, but also the votes for Congress. How is this going to affect the problems of the US fiscal cliff?
Well, it's obviously hard to tell at this stage, but the likelihood is that a Romney win, which still seems a slightly more outside chance even now, could see the Republicans in a more conciliatory mood as the fiscal cliff approaches, whereas an Obama win might mean that the Republicans, slightly sore at losing, might be in a slightly more combative mood as the year winds down.
Surely both sides, as you alluded to there, are so far apart because Obama wants to raise taxes on the very wealthy, whilst the Republicans are all about cutting taxes across the board, and there's such a great distance between the two sides.
Well, that's true. There is this obviously gulf of understanding between them, but there are some areas in which they're prepared to come to an agreement. Both have their particular shibboleths that they want to keep an eye on, so the Republicans are keen not to cut defence, whereas Republicans don't want to cut welfare and healthcare spending. So a deal is possible if both are prepared to sort of shed a few of the sacred cows that they like.
Even if we look below the presidential election and Congress with the Senate and the House of Representatives, it does seem that the two houses are going to be split, and that could potentially cause further problems.
I think we are possibly set for some nasty reruns of the debt ceiling crisis we saw in August last year, as both sides try to face each other down. Although I think really they'll still pull back at the last minute.
Yeah, so we have this deadline of January the 2nd is when those automatic spending cuts come into place. Do you think that those spending cuts are going to be enacted?
That seems the likelihood at the moment, but there are modifiers that will mean that the impact will be reduced, and therefore the knock-on effects on GDP, which is the big worry for everyone, will also be reduced as well.
I was wondering, in such a scenario, where does the money go from an investor's point of view? Because often investors will look at US treasuries and the US dollar as safe havens when things aren't going so well, but it almost seems counterintuitive if it's a US problem to look at those areas.
There is that element. Those traditional safe havens of US treasuries would slightly be ruled out while the uncertainty remains. So you'd see movements perhaps towards the yen as one of the even more ultimate safe havens, and also perhaps German bonds, another safe harbour in a crisis.
But generally speaking, if the US was to fall off the the fiscal cliff, it would be pretty disastrous, wouldn't it?
I think it's certainly something we wish to avoid as much as possible. It's obviously hard to quantify the actual impact, but the sort of slowdown we'd see in an economy the size of the US will be quite substantial and probably put the Eurozone crisis into the shade. How the US economy fares and the rest of us go with it. When the US sneezes, we all catch a cold. I think that is very much true here.
Yeah, I just want to finish off. I was following you on Twitter and you posted a chart about UK GDP, and you're pretty much saying that UK follows the rest of the Eurozone. Is that a fair comment?
I think that's a lot, that's fair really, because given our closeness to the Eurozone, although it's nice to see of course that ours are picking up slightly while there's still way down, and really that's a confidence thing. With the UK you have other factors that you can be concerned about, but at least you don't have the Eurozone crisis weighing on confidence in quite the same way you do for Germany, France and the rest of the Eurozone. Generally
speaking, do you think we should be getting very excited about this 1% uptick, or do you think it's just a statistical anomaly?
Well, it is the first reading, and so it could be subject to heavy revisions. A lot of it comes from financial services and government spending, and not really enough from construction. So whilst it's good news, I think it's not worth getting out the champagne just yet.
That's all for the moment, but we'll continue to monitor the situation in the US here on Duke's Copy TV. But from the banks of the River Thames, goodbye.